Well. Clemson Tiger fans, college football fans, welcome back to another episode of the All In Show right here on the Voice of College Football Clemson channel. Thank you so much for joining me. I am, as always, your host, Tiger Paul Craven. Jordan Bowman will be joining us momentarily. We got a great show for you guys tonight. We're going to talk a little draft, about some Tigers that may or may not hear their names called tonight in the first round of the NFL draft. We'll talk a little transfer portal, a little bit of spring games of opponents that Clemson will face in 2024. And then we'll hit our round of college football. And of course, as always, we'll turn the show over to the comment section at the end, see what you guys want to talk about, answer your questions, and all of that stuff. So hope you guys are ready for a great show tonight. But before we get into tonight's show, if you are not subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We are getting pretty close to 5,000 subscribers, so help us get over that hump. Help us reach that milestone. That would be greatly appreciated. Also, this is a live video, so if you're in the live chat right now, go ahead and get into the chat section, start getting your thoughts in, start communicating with us there, and also hit that like button while you're in here. And also, if you're watching this on a rewatch, we will post the individual topic timestamps at the end of the live stream. They'll be in the description of the video. So if you're interested in a particular topic that we covered tonight, go ahead and go to the description section, and those timestamps will be right there. And last but certainly not least, if you would like to support the show, the All In Show, what me and Jordan do here on the Voice of College Football, hit that super chat feature. One, it'll guarantee that your comment or question gets read on the live show. And two, it'll support, obviously, what me and Jordan do here, and it'll be greatly appreciated. And without further ado, let me bring on my co-host, Jordan Bowman. Jordan, how you doing tonight, man?
Doing great, man. Just glad to be back. This is it's been a more eventful week than probably what we had, leading up in the last week's show. So I'm just excited to talk about it. With the draft going on, I got it going on in the background right now. I'm sure you do too. I always like this time of year. It's just, it's a lot of, pageantry and all that. But it's fun from a Clemson perspective, just to hear these guys, their names called, and not even just from a Clemson perspective, but from a college football fan perspective, because we've watched so many of these players like throughout their career. It's easy to lose sight of it, and this is probably the last time we'll really be able to look at them as college kids.
That's right.
Just fulfilling their dream, because how the NFL sphere works. It's like, if you don't perform, you suck. And so you just kind of, you're professionals now. That just kind of comes with the territory. So it's going to be really cool. The Bears are on the clock now. I think we probably have a good idea about who they're about to select.
Not a whole lot of
mystery or drama.
Mystery there. It's pretty clear who they're probably going to end up going. The only shock at pick number 1 would be for it not to be Caleb Williams. So I got it like you. I got the draft on in the background. So I'll be keeping an eye on that throughout the show. I'm hoping, I think at least one of our Tigers will get their name called tonight, but hopefully two. So we'll keep that on in the background. Hope everybody's doing well out there. We got a couple people in the live chat already. Let's give a quick shout out to them before we go ahead and dive into the show and get started. Droid132 is in here. Thank you so much for getting into the live chat. Our old buddy John Sarian is in here as always. One of the OGs of the All In Show, which is pretty amazing. Jordan, do you know this is our 67th episode of the All In Show? Can you believe that?
Well, I didn't realize until I looked at the show title. Man, it is hard to believe. We're chugging right along, man. It's pretty great, and incredible. Just how much time has passed, but it's I enjoy it each and every week. So this is we're creeping closer and closer to 100. Man, when we get to episode 100.
Oh
Man,
man, that's gonna be a good one, man. We're gonna have to do something big on episode 100. We're gonna have to figure out what we're gonna do, but it's gonna have to be a big episode because
absolutely.
that's a milestone I'm looking forward to achieve. Lord willing, we'll both make it there, and all of these fine people in the comment section, in the chat section, and that watch it on the rewatch will be there with us for that 100th episode. It's been an amazing journey already, and with no end in sight. I can't wait to continue what we're doing here. On the Voice of College Football Clemson channel, and then more specifically the All In Show. One of my favorite things to do each and every week is to come here on Thursday and just chop it up about college football, man. It's it's nice to be surrounded by people that are as insane about college football as I am. So we're not alone out there. We may be few, but we are not alone.
Right.
But yeah, let's without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the first topic of the night, Jordan. And the first thing we're going to talk about tonight is the 2024 NFL Draft. And we have probably at least 6 Tigers that we hope to hear their name called at some point in time in the next 3 days as the NFL Draft unfolds. Guys that gave their heart and soul to Clemson, that did their best to further the program while they were there. At least one of them will probably hear his name called tonight, and that's probably Nate Wiggins. Outside chance that maybe Ruka Rohoro hears his name called, but it's going to be amazing to hear yet another Tiger's name get called in the first round of the NFL Draft. Like a lot of college football fans, I'm not a huge NFL guy. I do like to follow certain college players as they make it to the NFL. I like to root for them. I like to hope that they have a long and successful career, specifically the Clemson players, but not just Clemson players, just college football players in general that I enjoy watching. And even though I'm not a huge NFL guy, or I'm not going to sit here and watch every second of draft coverage, it is nice to stand back and see some of these college guys who have, worked at it since they were young kids, and they're finally realizing a dream. They're finally hearing their name called, and becoming a NFL player, and getting a huge payday, which is well-deserved. And, they get to take care of themselves and their families. And it's kind of a fun process to watch. And I'm excited to hear some Clemson guys finally realize their dreams.
Absolutely, man. It's one of my favorite, times of the year from a Clemson fan perspective. Just seeing these guys that we've watched grow up and play and become great football players right before our eyes. And so it's really cool to see them those dreams be fulfilled. I've got a stat for you that's going to make you. It's really cool, but also really depressing.
Uh-oh.
This is the last draft featuring players of the from the 2018 National Championship squad.
Wow, that's rough, man.
Yeah,
that's cool and kind of disheartening at the same time, I think.
Yeah, it's wild. So the obviously the 2 left that are hoping to hear their names called at some point during this draft this weekend are Xavier Thomas and Justin Maskell. Yeah. So if they both get drafted, I believe the final total of NFL draft picks from that 18 championship squad is 24. Wow. And that's not including the ones that went on to sign undrafted free agent deals and on NFL rosters. So shout out to Ross Taylor, Clemson's SID. He put out these stats today. I got some. He did a really good job, but that was one of them. So that was that. That's going to be. It's insane the amount of talent that team had.
It's insane, man. It truly you think back of that 2018 team and just how dominant they were that season. I mean, they made it look so easy. Led by, freshman Trevor Lawrence and, but, he wasn't the leader on that team. he kind of fell into, quite a great situation. Not to take anything from him, because Trevor Lawrence is a great quarterback, but the amount of leadership and talent that was on that team that he got to play with. Yeah, I mean, you think about 24 people drafted, potentially, if these two guys get drafted. I know at least one of them probably will, but hopefully both of them do, and that's 24 people off of that 2018 squad. That's an insane stat. That's a ton of talent. You talk about an NFL rich roster, and that's, like you said, that's just drafted guys. There were a lot of those guys that went on to sign undrafted free agent contracts and have some success in the NFL as well. So what a stat! I mean, it's crazy to think about. You don't really think about it in the moment, but looking back at it now and kind of 30,000-foot view of it, that's insane.
Absolutely, man. And another stat for you. Shout out to my guy Dustin Black. I don't know if he's watching right now, but he put this stat out today that Clemson from 1979 to 2009, so a 30-year span, they had a total of 17 first-round draft picks. And Clemson since 2010 has had 17 first-round draft picks, and very likely will add another one to that total tonight.
Wow.
That I just, to put that in perspective, it just, when you think about kind of the history of this program and kind of, just the, where this program was, especially after Danny Ford departed, to this unprecedented run that Dabo has been on. I mean, I think it's always good to keep things in perspective sometimes about just how great this program has ascended and the heights that they've ascended to where just yearly churning out first round NFL draft picks is the expectation and is commonplace. There's not many programs like it. And then another, I think Ross put out another stat that was, hold on, I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm going to read it verbatim. He said that Clemson produced multiple first-round picks in the 2019, 2020, 21, and 2023 NFL drafts. Clemson is one of 16 schools to produce multiple first-round picks in at least one draft in that span. And Clemson is one of only 7 schools to accomplish the feat multiple times. Only Alabama, who's done it 5 times, Clemson, who's done it 4 times, and Ohio State, who's also done it 4 times, have produced multiple first-round picks in at least 4 of the last 5 NFL drafts.
Wow.
I
mean, what a run by Clemson football. And I know it's kind of hard as Clemson fans sometimes to keep it, in perspective, just how special this run that Dabo Swinney has produced at Clemson is. And it's when you start listing off stats like that it kind of becomes real, And I know, the past 3 seasons obviously haven't gone how we've wanted it to as Clemson fans. Obviously, we have obviously taken a few steps back as a program. But like I said earlier, when you scale it back and you just take a 30,000-foot view, it truly is amazing, the run that Clemson has been on since 2010. And those stats you gave about 17 first-round picks, we expect it to go up to 18, possibly 19 tonight. Outside shot of that, but definitely we expect it to be 18 after, tonight's first-round draft. So truly amazing, man. And I think it's important to enjoy it while it's still happening, because there probably, unfortunately, will become a time when Clemson is not on this run anymore. Eventually, everything has to come to an end. Football is a kind of cyclic type sport like that. You see, teams have these amazing runs and then they kind of fall off for, a decade or more, and then they kind of come back. So there's ebbs and flows to it. So I think it's important to enjoy it while it's still happening. But it's also okay to want the program to get back to a place where it obviously was. So.
Absolutely, man. And I think it's just a reminder that, the talent acquisition has not been a problem for this program, and I don't think it ever will be. At least with Dabo Swinney as head coach. And so it's always it's a blessing and a curse of a reminder that, hey, the last couple of years have not been up to where the standard has been raised, but there's obviously plenty of reasons to think that Clemson's not far off, and I definitely don't think that heading into this season that they're far off from getting back to where they were. But at the end of the day, you have to go out and play the games. The games have to be played, and you got to win those games. And you need your, the future, these guys that you expect to have their names called in these future NFL drafts to play like it. And so that's kind of ultimately where, that's where it lies at the end of the day. We can talk about the coaching staffs and transfer portal this and all of that, but at the end of the day, Clemson has all the ingredients right now to be successful, and it's just about making sure that you have the right cooks in the kitchen first of all, and that these guys are playing and buying into what this culture and what this program has been about for the last decade and a half. So didn't mean to make it a big picture thing, but it's always good to remind people that this program is not far off, and there are a lot of reasons to think that things could be trending back in the right direction. But
yeah, absolutely.
Still have some questions to answer.
Yeah, tons of questions to answer still, tons of growth that needs to happen over the summer, as we detailed in the breakdown of the spring game and where we thought the program was exiting spring in 2024. Caleb Williams, by the way, was the first pick in the NFL draft. Washington's on the board right now. I think their pick is in, so we'll find out who they're going to pick next. But keeping right along with kind of the Clemson guys, let's talk a little bit about some guys that we expect to be drafted within these next 3 days of the NFL draft quickly, and then we'll move on to the next topic. I think we'll start, obviously, with Nate Wiggins. We expect that he's going to be the name that will be called at some point in time during this first round, possibly Ruka Rororo, outside chance, like I said, probably unlikely, but still could happen. So just those two guys. Yeah. What are your thoughts? Obviously, will they be picked in the first round or maybe early in the second round? Where do you see those two guys going? And then we'll talk about maybe the other ones that we expect to be drafted throughout the next 2 days.
Yeah, I think Nate is a no-brainer. I think he's one of the best cornerbacks in this draft. This is a really good cornerback class. So I don't expect him to be the first corner taking off the board, even though, my Clemson bias and my Clemson goggles, tell me that I think he's the best in this draft. It's definitely the highest upside. Just from watching him play, these last three, and just watching him grow. He's always had the tools, and he's as athletically gifted of a cornerback as Clemson has had. And he has the attitude and work ethic to match. So, I really don't think there's, obviously there's the size concerns that, that people have talked about, but I think he plays, I think he plays big, and, he can put on a couple of pounds if you need him to, but I really don't think it's going to be an issue for him. So, yes. Beyond that, there's not many holes in his game. He's one of the best man corners in the draft, probably the best man corner in this draft.
Yeah.
He can run with anybody. He's long, rangy. I think he's everything you could ask for in a number one, boundary corner. So definitely expect him to be picked in the first, probably. I think at the earliest, probably in the mid-teens, if things go right. But I'd probably probably early 20s is kind of where I've seen him mocked the most, which I think probably makes sense. Again, this is a really good cornerback draft. You got guys like Quinyon Mitchell and Kool-Aid McKinstry and Cooper DeJean. Who is I'm laughing, but he's a really good cornerback. And I'm missing that Terrion Arnold. Like, yeah, I mean, these are all first round quality corners, so it's a good draft. But I definitely expect him to be taken in the first round. And then I think Rook has one of the highest upsides, and he's gotten a lot of love throughout this draft process. But obviously, he's not as refined as some of the other defensive tackle prospects, and that's probably kind of where his, where it's like teams will probably wait to take him. I probably expect him to go in the second.
Yeah. Yeah, as do I. I expect Rook to go in the second as well. I hope he finds his way into the end of the first round, but obviously not hold my breath for that. Obviously, Nate Wiggins is a guy that is going to go in the first round. And, I know the size concerns that you bring out that some NFL scouts have talked about, but I tell you what you can't question is the tape that he's put out there and his mental toughness. I mean, we've seen this guy transform from a guy that literally got used and abused on national television, and that never happened to him again. Because that's the mental toughness that you want in a number one corner. In a true lockdown man number one corner, you need somebody with that mentality. And we all know the absolute speed that he has. So he's not going to get burnt very often. He has amazing closing speed. So if he does find himself out of position, he has the ability to catch up and correct a mistake, whereas some other corners without that kind of speed don't have that ability. So I think it's a give and take with him, but he'll absolutely go, I think, middle of the first round, hopefully closer to the middle teens than the 20s. But I just hope he lands in a really good spot in a good defense that is going to use him in the proper way. And I hope he has a really good NFL career. A couple other guys that'll probably hear their name called throughout the next 2 days. Will Shipley comes to mind, obviously, Xavier Thomas, Tyler Davis, just to name a few. Just some quick thoughts on the rest of those guys, and then we'll turn the page from the NFL draft.
Yeah. Obviously a lot of guys, I think Clemson in total has 8, if my count is correct, 8 or 9,
Yep.
9 Tigers in this that are entered and hoping to hear their name called. But yeah, you already hit on some of them. I think obviously Jeremiah Trotter is he's a guy that at different points in the cycle was considered a potential first round pick. But I think the kind of the talk around him has definitely gone in the wrong direction. Just from from a physical tool standpoint, he's just not. He's an undersized linebacker, and he's not an overly elite athlete. And so if teams are gonna use a first round pick on you, you're undersized at linebacker, they're gonna want you to be able to run at a really elite level, and he's not that, but he's extremely instinctive, great pass rusher. He can do a lot of things well. Really good zone feel. In coverage, I think he's going to be a really good take for somebody. I've seen him anywhere from late second to third, which I understand from an NFL draft standpoint that's just kind of the way it goes.
That just kind of happens when you're undersized. I mean, the NFL draft process and the scout process, it's heavy on measurables, and when you don't meet those measurables, they find reasons to, dock you points or hold things against you. So it's unfortunate for him, but he's still going to be drafted really high, and whoever gets him is going to get a steal at where they get him, because we know Jeremiah Trotter's ability. And we know the pedigree that he comes from and the long NFL career that his father had. So no doubt in my mind that he'll have a very successful NFL career.
Absolutely. As Drake May gets selected by the Patriots. So 3 quarterbacks off the board. Jaden Daniels was picked by the Commanders at second. So the draft has been pretty what people have expected so far. This was the top 3 that a lot of I've seen. I'd seen a lot, and it's holding fast.
Three picks, 3 quarterbacks: Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May. No real surprise there. Not a whole lot of surprises there. Not a whole lot of intrigue with those 3 picks. Everybody figured that's where it was going to be. Another guy that I'm looking forward to personally, getting his name called in the NFL draft, is Xavier Thomas. I've made it clear on this channel multiple times how I feel about that guy, and just his growth at Clemson from the time that he committed to Clemson out of IMG, and he was kind of a guaranteed 3-and-done guy. He was going to be a first-round draft pick, and things just didn't go his way. COVID happened, and he got really sick, and had a lot of respiratory issues, and fought with a little bit of mental health issues, fighting back from that, and just his whole entire journey at Clemson, from all the injuries to the mental battles that he had, to finish the way that he did at Clemson, is truly remarkable, in my opinion. And it's the epitome of what Clemson is as a program. And I think he said it best on multiple occasions, and how he feels about Clemson. And he said, Clemson could have quit on him a long time ago, and they probably would have been right to, but they stuck by him. And look what he turned into. And he rewarded Clemson tenfold by the way that he finished his career and the leader that he became in the locker room. So I can't wait for him to get his name called, because he has been through a ton to get to this point. And I'm sure it's going to be an amazing feeling for him to finally realize that dream. Not how he envisioned himself getting to the NFL, but regardless of that, he's made it there.
Absolutely, man. I mean, XT is, going to be one of my all-time favorite Tigers. Just the way he, his story, and just, his ability, was well touted. He's a guy that came in number 1 overall recruit in his class, but clearly was not mentally prepared, right off the gate to really handle all of those challenges. And it took him time. And, it's one of those things that's like, not everybody's path is the same. There were some bumps and bruises along the way. COVID definitely didn't help.
Yeah, it was rough.
But I'm happy for him and how he's come out on the other side. So really excited, for him to get his name called. I definitely think he will get his name called. He's gotten a lot of love from draft circles as a potential mid to late round guy. His explosiveness off the edge, it just jumps off to you at tape on tape. The pressure numbers are crazy. It sucks he didn't get the sack totals to match it, but he
got held on every single play.
Yeah, but he was as disruptive as you'll find in this class, pretty consistently. So I think he's going to be a really good steal for somebody in the later rounds. And he's rebuilt his body. He's fast. He's twitchy, athletic. I mean, the stuff that he showed in high school, he was able to regain a lot of that. These past couple of seasons. So happy for him, and excited. When he gets his name called, I'll definitely be tuning in for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited for all of these guys. Will Shipley, Tyler Davis, all these dudes that will eventually get their names read off in this NFL draft and realize their dream. I just hope, as a whole, for every single one of those guys, that they have a long and successful and healthy career, and that they represent Clemson University like that. I know that they will. So I'll be looking out for each and every one of these Clemson guys and where they go in the draft and where they end up, and and rooting them on because, for me, I don't have an NFL team, so it's really easy for me to just kind of follow guys and root them on and just want the best for these Clemson guys and then other guys that I enjoy watching as well, but mainly the Clemson Tiger guys.
Absolutely. Marvin Harrison Jr. off the board to the Cardinals.
Off the board at 4.
Yep.
So
probably the best, one of the best wide receiver prospects we've seen in quite some time. Yeah, no surprise there. He's going to be really good.
Yeah.
His dad was really good, so.
Absolutely. Yes, yes, he was. Very good. All right.
Yeah, let's move on from the.
Let's go ahead and move on from the
draft
NFL talk and go ahead. If you guys are in here, I see we got 18 people in the live chat right now. If you haven't already hit that like button, go ahead and do so. If you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. We also have the super chat feature. If you want to support what me and Jordan do right here on the All In Show, go ahead and hit that super chat button, and it'll guarantee we read your comment during the live show. Thank you guys so much for being here. And Jordan, let's go ahead and transition to our next topic, and we're going to talk a little transfer portal. We talked about it in last show. No transfers had affected Clemson yet. We talked about how quiet the transfer portal had been. It's still relatively quiet. The transfer portal's not going crazy. But like we predicted after spring practice ended, and like we talked about in our spring game recap, we expected the transfer portal to affect Clemson, albeit we didn't expect this mass exodus or anything like that. But we expected, some players to leave via the transfer portal, and that has happened. We've had two kind of depth pieces, if you will, leave the Clemson Tigers. And the first one we'll talk about is Adam Kasai. He is actually a freshman. He's only been on campus for a couple months. He was an early enrollee in this class. He was originally committed to Minnesota. He decommitted from Minnesota, quickly committed to Clemson, early enrolled to Clemson, obviously. Gets through spring practice, obviously, for whatever reason, whether it be where he falls on the depth chart or how he meshes with Chris Rumph or, the new kind of system that they're running on the defensive line. For whatever reason, he felt like Clemson was not the place for him anymore. He jumps in the portal and quickly commits back to Minnesota. So he did not spend too much time in the portal. Did this surprise you at all? Being that he had just got on campus and has only been there a couple months, or does this kind of make sense, and did you kind of see this coming?
I didn't see it coming per se. It came as a surprise. I mean, really, anytime you have a true freshman only be on campus for a semester, the semester is not even over quite yet. Right. You never expect them to just jump into the portal, but that's kind of where we are now, and it's just something you have to keep in the back, in the back of your head, even at a place like Clemson, where the retention has been, pretty good relative to other top tier programs. But when you really think about kind of the circumstances with how he came to Clemson, it wasn't the most shocking thing in the world. Like I was a little surprised, but I was like, it makes sense kind of with how it played out. Adam was definitely one of the guys that Clemson was, took later in the cycle. He was a guy that had really impressed, had been on campus a couple of times. He showed out in particular at one of Clemson's camps, and Dabo in particular really, really liked him. And, he was a guy that, absolutely fell in love with Clemson. He was a huge Clemson fan growing up. And, him and Dabo just kind of hit it off. And so, it kind of felt like, that was where he wanted to be. Dabo wanted him to be there. Right. And, he quickly, renounced his pledge to Minnesota where he had been committed and jumped into the boat when the offer came. And obviously, in the time since that happened and where we are today, there are a lot of things changed. His position coach changed,
Yep.
and he was always viewed. He was not the highest rated guy. He was more of a. His size was what jumped out to you. His height and length is really what jumped out. I mean, the guy's 6'8", and he's got extremely, or 6'7", and with extremely long arms. So you see kind of the frame to be a defensive end. It was something that was really intriguing, and he had showed out really well, at camps. But it was very clear when he got to campus that it was going to be a longer term development. And I think especially with comments from people close to him, that coupled with he was kind of the outsider coming in. He didn't have the relationships with the rest of the staff and with the his team that some of the other guys in the 2023 cycle had. Like they had been they had been together. I'm sorry, not 2023, the 2024 guys.
Yep.
Like they had spent a lot of time around each other. They were really close, and he was kind of the guy that kind of hopped in the boat late. And so it just it's one of those things where even when it's your dream school, you never really know what how you're going to adjust to things like on campus until you actually get there. And I think there were there were a multitude of reasons where it didn't seem clear that it was going to be the fit that he thought it was and that Clemson thought it was. And so he ultimately made the decision to enter the transfer portal. And honestly, I think that was probably the best decision for him based off of what I know about his situation. So I think it's one of those things where Clemson kind of came to an understanding with him as well, and I think they had both sides had a honest conversation about kind of where he stood and kind of where things were and how he was feeling about his situation. And it was clear that maybe he needs to go find somewhere else. So I'm happy for him, and I'm glad he found a landing spot really quick. Obviously, he had the previous relationships with the Minnesota coaching staff, so he's going to a place that he already has relationships with, and I think he's going to be a really good football player in the future. But it's clear that he didn't mesh as well as he had hoped with the culture and everything, and I think that was kind of one of the driving factors, and obviously the changes that happened and him being a longer term project with where he stood in the depth chart. I think all of those things combined to influence this decision. So that's kind of the long story short. That's kind of where we are, and that's another hit to your defensive end room. I mean, I definitely didn't expect him to be a factor to play this season, but from a numbers standpoint, it does put a little bit more stress on your depth. So we'll kind of see.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's a depth piece that you lose, and we talked about it all throughout spring about how thin this edge group is, and it's not ideal that you lose a guy, albeit just a depth piece, and a guy that you certainly didn't expect to contribute this season. Obviously, Adam Kasai was brought in as a project guy. He's going to need probably 2 years to really bring him along to where he needs to be in order to compete at a place like Clemson. But obviously, we talked about it after the spring game about how these exit meetings were going to happen. So not only does Dabo Swinney meet with all the guys, but obviously their position groups, their individual position coaches are going to have exit meetings with them. And, this was probably something that was talked about in the exit meeting. This is where expectations are laid out, and, it gets, pretty real pretty quickly, and you're kind of told where you stand. And maybe it's that he didn't really mesh with Rumpf. That's not who he committed to play for. Obviously, the dynamics in the edge group have changed, and along the defensive line, there's been tackles move out to edge since he committed to the Tigers. So all of those things could have been factors. And he could have just, not necessarily, maybe Clemson just wasn't what he thought it was. And clearly he went back to something that he was very familiar with in Minnesota. So obviously we wish him the best, hope that he has a long, successful, and healthy career over at Minnesota and contributes well for them. Let's go ahead and flip the page to the next guy that we lost, another depth piece, been on campus for a year, former 2023 commit, Zach Owens, 6'6", 375 pounds, inside offensive lineman, decides to enter the transfer portal. Not really a surprise for me here, I think. Obviously, we got a lot of offensive linemen there. Again, that's another group that there's been a change in coaching. There's been a change in the voice in the room since he's committed to be a Clemson Tiger. So I think that's probably a contributing factor for him. And then probably just where he ended up on the depth chart and where everything shook out after spring. He probably looked around. He had his exit meeting with Dabo Sweeney, had his exit meeting with Matt Luke, and just kind of looked around and was like, I think I need to go somewhere else. So again, it's never good to lose depth pieces. It's never good to, you're never like, oh yeah, I'm so glad that dude's not here anymore, unless there's some sort of problem in the locker room. And I've never heard anything about any of these two guys being that issue. So again, another depth piece gone, but I don't think he was a guy that was going to contribute along the offensive line in any significant way this season. So again, wish him the best. Hopefully he lands in a good spot. He has not landed anywhere yet. He's not committed anywhere yet, but hopefully he lands in a good spot. And again, just like I said about Adam Kasai, I hope he has a long, successful, and healthy career wherever he ends up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. With Owens, it was always, when he came in, he came in behind the 8 ball. Not only was he, he's a very massive human being, and he was coming off of a torn ACL, coming out of his senior high school season. And so, last season, throughout the 2023, he was an obvious redshirt candidate. He wasn't ready to go, and then he had to rehab all of that. And I think that definitely just made things difficult and kind of pushed him further behind than where you would want him to be. And so obviously, couple that with the changes at offensive line coach and there's still it's a pretty crowded room right now as far as the offensive line is concerned. It was just a lot of guys that have just gotten ahead of him and they're more experienced than him at this point. And even some of the younger guys that just came in a little bit more ready to play, like Elijah Thurman. It made things difficult. Some of the true freshmen from from this past season as well, they got ahead of him, and so it's couple, and then he has to deal with transforming his body and getting down to a better playing weight. Just a lot of things that were kind of not going his way as far as his standing in the depth chart, and I think that's just one of the contributing factors. And so he was still a pretty good ways away from being able to play at a serviceable level. Just people that observed in practice, he just really great, really great kid, great personality. But you got to be able to move in this Garrett Riley system. You can't have slow feet. You can't. You have to be in prime, really good shape. And just he still had some work to do in that department. And so definitely didn't help his path to playing time with a brand new offensive line coach that didn't recruit him. And it makes things difficult for the guys that were that kind of had a longer term, development track when you bring in a new offensive line coach, one that had no hand in his recruitment, doesn't have any prior relationships. It's just it makes it very difficult. So, I think he made the decision that was best for him, and we'll see where he ends up. He's definitely heard from a lot of Power 5 schools. I mean, he was a pretty decently rated recruit coming out of high school, 4-star kid. His size, just massive human being. So when he gets his body right, I think he'll end up being a really good football player. So I think he'll land in a decent spot, and he'll be okay. And I'll be rooting for him because he is, like I said, he is a great kid. Just really fun, lovable, personality. And so, but things don't always work out, and there were a lot of things that kind of went against him. A lot of that he couldn't control, and so it was probably for the best, for him personally.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, he continues to need to transform his body and get into playing shape, and obviously he's going to do that elsewhere now. So wish him the best. Hope that he can get to a good landing spot and have a good career. But the question that people are inevitably going to ask is Clemson going to replace any of these transfer portal losses via the transfer portal? And the long and short answer is no, they're not going to. These were obviously depth pieces. I think they will fill this offensive line slot that they now have with the exit of Zach Owens, with the incoming freshman class, the 2025 class that they're currently working on. That frees up another spot for them to maybe take another high school player there. So I don't expect Clemson to do anything in the portal. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Expecting Clemson to address, departures in the transfer portal is definitely wishful thinking at this point. I'll believe it when I see it, but it does open, obviously, if you're not going to address things in the portal, it does mean you need to expand your numbers for your next class, recruiting class, and I think that will happen. And so I think that does free up numbers for your 25 class from an offensive line standpoint. You're definitely going to need to. I don't expect all of your targets to end up in your class, your primary targets to end up in your class, and so it means you're going to have to pivot, and you're going to have room for these guys. So, I think there's always it's always a blessing and a curse when you have departures like this in the portal. But the good thing is I think this class Clemson has a lot of guys on their radar that I'm pretty high on. And this is a good offensive line class in this 25 class in general. And so I think that does present some opportunities to get some really quality depth and future starters. So again, that's just the silver lining, and that's the bright side of when you have departures like this. So,
yeah, absolutely. We'll go ahead and leave the portal talk there. We got 20 people in the live chat right now. Go ahead and hit that like button, guys. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Come and hang out with us. Me and Jordan do the All In Show right here every Thursday, 8 p.m. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and come hang out. So you're here every time we go live. Also, if you're watching this in the rewatch, we will put timestamps for each individual topic that we covered tonight. So no worries there. And as always, the super chat feature is available for you guys to support the show. Jordan, let's go ahead and transition into our next topic tonight. And we're going to talk a couple spring games for some opponents that Clemson will face in 2024. Obviously, we did a deep dive for the Clemson spring game a couple episodes ago, and we've started to kind of just give surface level evaluations of some spring games for Clemson opponents that we will face ultimately in 2024. Again, the transfer portal is still open for 5 more days, so we will see what teams look like. But as of right now, we will kind of give our opinion on a couple spring games, and we'll start with none other than Florida State. There's a familiar face on Florida State if you haven't recognized Jordan, which I'm sure you have, in former Clemson quarterback DJ Uiagalelei, which is now the starting quarterback for the Seminoles heading into the 2024 season, presumably, unless something crazy happens. He will be the starter there. Obviously, they had their spring game this past Saturday. I think DJ Uiagalelei's stat line was like 12 for 26, like 177 yards, something like that. I watched, some highlights from the spring game. I watched basically kind of the first part of it. I didn't get to watch the entire spring game, obviously, but the parts that I did saw, to be completely frank and honest, I saw the same DJ Uiagalelei that we've always seen, both at Clemson, at Oregon State, and now at Florida State. I don't think that DJ is going to make any sort of massive leaps or growth. I think DJ kind of is who he is as a quarterback. He's a very serviceable quarterback, and if you have the right pieces around him, he can do a lot of good for you. But he's still a guy, just watching the spring game, that's going to put the ball in harm's way. He's going to make some really great throws, and he's going to make some really bad throws. And those are all going to be mixed and intertwined into, what he is as a quarterback. Obviously, the other thing that pops out for Florida State is their running game. They have just a stable of backs that they can roll out one after the next that are dynamic. They're explosive. They broke off a couple huge run plays in that game. Obviously, Florida State's defense, the back end of their defense is really good. Their cornerback, their safeties, just the back end of that defense as a whole is pretty well. So that was just kind of my initial thoughts on the Florida State spring game. Not a whole lot of surprises, not a whole lot I don't think can be gleaned from it. I think it was pretty standard. It was pretty much what I expected when I tuned into the Florida State spring game and knew that, you were obviously going to see DJ Uiagalelei playing. So, what were your thoughts on DJU? What were your thoughts on Florida State as a whole, and just kind of them exiting, spring 2024, heading into the summer, and how you feel about them to this point?
Oh my God. Sorry. For those of you that don't know, I am a pretty diehard Titans fan. They just selected with the number 7 overall pick and took they took JC Latham.
What y'all doing, man? What y'all doing?
Okay. Let me just answer the question, because I have a lot of thoughts. I see my boy Sammy in the chat. Oh brother. Okay, so my observations from the Florida State spring game. As far as DJ is concerned, I mean, like you said, you hit on it. He had some moments, and listen, again, we always have to reiterate, with any team, that spring games are not always indicative of how a team is going to perform during the season. We've seen some horrible spring games from teams that went out and to set records. Like, it just, it's a glorified practice, and no team is a finished product. But I do think the observations, they were a continuation of just what we've seen from DJ throughout his career. Just a lot of some really, really good throws. He had some nice sideline throws. And he did a good job managing the pressure, because that Florida State defense is going to be really good this year. They're really good in the second level, especially. They still have some really good pieces on the D line. That's going to be a pretty good defense.
Yeah.
I do want to preface that. I think that's going to be the strength of their team this year, to be quite honest with you. But I thought he did a good job of managing pressure for the most part. But still the accuracy issues, missed reads, not always putting the ball, not always taking care of and being safe with the football at times. He had a couple of throws that weren't picks that should have been picks. But it was like you said, it was just more of kind of what we've seen from DJ. But as far as everything else, I think their running back room is going to be really, really good. They have a really good stable of backs there. They've had some good transfers. That's going to be a strength of that team. They have basically everybody back on the offensive line.
Yeah.
I think one thing that kind of stood out to me was they didn't look all that impressive from the receiver position. They don't really have a guy that I would say is a true alpha right now. What's the kid, the transfer from Alabama that they got? He looked pretty good. He got hurt in the spring game. From what I can tell, it's not going to be long term, so he should be okay, which is good. But beyond that, they have some fine players at receiver, but they don't have. It's clear they don't have a Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson type of receiver on that team right now. And with a quarterback like DJ, that's going to that's not going to be one to really elevate the players around him from a receiver, especially from a receiver standpoint, and from a Florida State offense that wants to take shots down the field, especially with his big arm.
Yes.
That's something I would be keeping an eye on. They just didn't really. They didn't really, Malik Benson is his name. It took me forever to think of it. The receiver from the transfer receiver from Alabama. I think he's their number one guy right now. But outside of that, they have some decent slot types. They have some, Jalen Lucas is a kind of and Jalen Lucas and Ja'Kai Douglas are kind of slot back receiver, running back type gadget players that I think are really scary. They can really run. But I don't, from their true, wide receiver room standpoint, they don't really have an alpha, just matchup nightmare that I think would scare me right now. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. But I do think they're going to be a really good team this year. So, that's just one of their limitations. I think they'll be better on the offensive line. I think they're going to have a really good run game. And with a quarterback like DJ, you definitely need to have a complementary run game to make things a little bit easier on him. And again, I think the defense is going to be pretty stout as well. So, I overall, there wasn't too much to take away from Florida State's spring game. I think, but I do see that, the talent that they've amassed has definitely increased over the past few seasons, and they're definitely not, Mike Norvell has them in a really good spot right now, and they just look more like what we're used to seeing, what we used to see from Florida State back in the day. So they're going to be a tough to handle. When Clemson goes down into Tallahassee, that's going to be a tough game, and they're going to be, I think Clemson and Florida State are co-favorites right now to win the ACC, and I think that's about right. I think Florida State looked the part. Just from an athlete standpoint. So, they'll be obviously there'll be a team we'll be watching, and obviously we get them really early. So, dang, Michael Penix went pretty early, went earlier than I thought he was going to.
Yeah, they're going to be a dynamic team. They're going to be a really good defensive team, and they're going to try to be explosive on offense. Obviously, that's kind of Mike Norvell's MO. He wants to push the ball down the field and be explosive. But they're also going to have the ability to lean on that running game, I think, because they do have, several dynamic backs back there that can really break a game open at any point in time if the block's set up the right way. So we'll continue to monitor them. Obviously, they're going to be one of Clemson's biggest games come 2024. So we'll obviously be paying attention to them early on in the season before we play them. And we'll see. They may make some moves in the transfer portal. Obviously, we know that Mike Norvell leans heavy into the transfer portal. So if he feels that there's any deficiencies and there's room on the roster and there's a guy out there, he'll address it via the transfer portal. You can believe that. So we'll see how they look. I think it was a pretty, par for the course spring game. I think it's always interesting as I start watching more spring games from more teams and kind of how they run things. It's just interesting, like the different ways that teams go about spring games and the drills that they run and just the different nuances that they do for the various spring games around the country. So we'll leave Florida State there and we'll pick up just north, and we'll go up to Columbia, South Carolina. The South Carolina Gamecocks also held their spring game this past Saturday, debuting freshman quarterback Lenore Sellers out there running all around, running for touchdowns and doing all sorts of stuff. They were doing special team drills in between each drive, which I found interesting. Not a very exciting spring game to watch. I'm not just trying to talk trash. It was a very boring spring game. I watched the first half of the South Carolina spring game, and then I just kind of shut it down after that. Not a whole lot going on. I mean, they obviously need some work, but what I will say is Lenore said he looks like the real deal, man. He's dynamic. He looks like he is, he's obviously going to be a playmaker. He's going to be that guy that's out there creating off platform, just kind of making things happen. And honestly, they're going to need a lot of that because I don't think this offensive line is going to be much improved. They don't look to be very much improved heading into transitioning out from spring into summer and fall. They look to be about the same on the offensive line. So he's going to have to be dynamic out there. He's going to have to be able to escape the pocket and make throws on the run and do a lot of off platform, kind of draw it up in the dirt type of, scramble drills with wide receivers. So he looks to have that ability. So that's probably something big that they have going for them. But those were just kind of my observations. I thought it was interesting. They had Shane Beamer on the broadcast. He was kind of running around coaching and trying to be on the broadcast at the same time. So what were your thoughts on the South Carolina spring game and more importantly, the new quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, basically everything you said. I mean, I think you see the physical talent from Lenore Sellers. I mean, that we saw in high school. I mean, he was arguably the best quarterback in the state. He was once committed to Syracuse, and Shane Beamer and that staff did a good job of really recruiting him hard and getting him there. And I think you see all the physical ability in the world. He's a really good player. My question is he's a first-year starter.
Yes.
That's always a question that you with any quarterback that you have to have and a conversation that you have to have. And obviously I really am not very impressed with what they put around him as of right now.
Yeah.
Obviously the offensive line was a big issue for them last year. Some of that was due to injury, but I don't think they were particularly special. My light is doing the thing again. I thought I had avoided that.
The light strikes again.
Yeah, it does. What a shame. But yeah, like I just the offensive line is not impressive. I think they had a good freshman class. They have a good freshman class coming in, but if you need a lot of those guys to start, that's probably not a great sign. They desperately needed help at receiver, and they went and got some guys that they could get. But I wasn't overly impressed watching them. They definitely don't have a Xavier Legette, Juice Wells type of receiver. They definitely could have used Juice Wells not transferring to Ole Miss like that.
No doubt.
That probably would have helped a ton. I do think defensively, to their credit, I think they've done a good job, and I think they improved toward the end of last year. They made some schematic changes that kind of helped them, and I think Clayton White, their defensive coordinator, I think he has that group looking pretty good. Dylan Stewart is that true freshman defensive end. He's a monster. He's a dog. He's going to be really good for them, and he showed it, time and time again in that spring game. He's just really disruptive. So he's going to be a problem. I think they've improved overall, just along the defensive line. And that's probably something they needed to do because they were just really soft up front, and especially in the interior. Teams ran on them a lot. So I think that defensively they're going to be a little bit better. I don't know how much better, but I think they'll be better than they were last year. But again, my question with them is definitely offense. I think they have a really young, talented quarterback with a supporting cast that, if I were a Gamecock fan, I know I'm speaking from a Clemson fan perspective. Yeah. I wouldn't be overly excited about the offense and the supporting cast right now. But long term, high on Lenore Sellers and his ability, and if you get some pieces around him, that he'll have a really great career. But it could be a struggle this season. We'll see. But maybe he makes things happen and they overperform expectations.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you have a freshman QB coming in and you're going to ask him to do as much as they're probably going to have to ask him to do, it's not ideal. But, I mean, with that said, he does look like the real deal. He does look legit. You can see the athleticism. You can see the playmaking ability. So, they're going to put a lot on that young man's shoulders with not a whole lot of supporting cast around him. So, we'll see how that goes for him. Obviously, it's less than ideal. Maybe they'll make some moves via the transfer portal in the next 5 days and try to get a couple skill position guys to come in and help him out. We'll see. Obviously, we'll be monitoring them. That's one of the biggest games of the season for Clemson every single year. So we'll see how their season shakes out. Obviously, we'll play them last game of the season as we always do. But we'll go ahead and leave the spring games there. We have 19 people in the live chat right now. Thank you guys so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Jackson Johnson put up a comment here that I wanted to highlight. Shop the Amazon link using the link that he put below here. This is a link. It's not anything in specific. It's just when you're buying things on Amazon, if you use this link, it will support the Voice of College Football, and they get a little bit of money in return. It doesn't cost you anything. It's just a link that you use. You buy what you normally buy, and Mark Rogers and the Voice of College Football umbrella as a whole get a little bit of support. So if you guys, I know a ton of people do a lot of shopping on Amazon, so always go into the description of the video, pull that Amazon link if you can remember to, and support the show in that way with the stuff that you were already going to buy anyway. Appreciate that if you guys could do that as well. Obviously, hit the like button if you haven't already. Subscribe if you hadn't. We do have a Patreon as well. Mark Rogers has a Patreon, so there's exclusive live streams and watch parties and betting advice and all sorts of stuff like that. So join the Patreon if you're interested in that as well, and support the Voice of College Football in that way. But we'll go ahead and leave spring there, and we will transition to the last topic of the night, and that is our segment on Around College Football, Jordan. And there was some big news in college football. I don't know if you realized, breaking news this week, our old buddy Reggie Bush finally got his 2005 Heisman Trophy back after it was taken away from him back in 2010 because of the alleged $300,000+ that he received in a non-permissible benefits, I guess, if you will, from the University of Southern Cal. This has been a topic for college football fans for a very long time, and it's obviously become a much more heated topic as college football has evolved. You got the introduction of the NIL and players getting paid for their name, image, and likeness, which is essentially what Reggie Bush was accused of doing. Um, so a lot of people that didn't sit well with them that now college football allows you to do that, and he still um, doesn't have his Heisman, and his records are, you know, stricken from the books, and the NCAA doesn't recognize his stats, and the Heisman doesn't recognize him as a Heisman Trophy winner, and all of that has changed this week. Obviously, not the NCAA side of it, but the Heisman Trophy side of it went ahead and decided that they were going to restore Reggie Bush's Heisman Trophy. I think it's long overdue. This is probably mainly a result of Reggie Bush bringing a defamation lawsuit against the NCAA when they came out with comments of doubling down basically on taking his Heisman Trophy away and expunging his records from the books because he was involved in a quote pay for play type of situation, which is not the situation that he was accused of initially, which is why he ultimately brought the defamation case against the NCAA. Just another most recent example of the NCAA getting absolutely owned in court. They have zero power. They have no teeth. I don't know why they're out here trying to do anything or double down on anything. It's just like at this point, when you're the NCAA, what are you doing? Like, why would you double down and be like, no, we stand beside our decision? He was in a pay for play type of situation. First of all, what do you think NIL is right now? It's literally pay for play. That's what it is. It's not NIL. It's pay for play. Let's be honest. Um, Two, last time I checked, Jordan, no matter how much money you're getting paid, it doesn't help you perform on the football field.
Right.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Reggie Bush was accused of taking steroids. I don't think he was accused of taking any other performance enhancing drugs. So I don't think the alleged $300,000 or paying for his mom for a place to stay or any of those things that were alleged, I don't think any of that resulted in all those touchdowns he scored or all those yards that he ran for and all the stuff that he did while at USC. So to me, it never made sense to take his Heisman Trophy away. Yes, did he technically, I guess, quote unquote, break the rules back then? But it had nothing to do with on the field stuff. And that is a stat. We know it's a stat driven award, and it's based off of what's done on the field. So it never made sense for me. I'm happy for Reggie Bush that he finally has his Heisman Trophy back. And I'm happy that the NCAA took yet another kick in the teeth because they're an absolute ridiculous organization that continues to just show how tone deaf they are to the world of college football and the fans that really make college football what it is.
Yeah, I'm with you. It was always dumb, and I think one of the biggest things was that he was already on USC's roster. Like it wasn't like it was it was used as a recruiting inducement or like these were benefits he received while as a player at the University of Southern California, and a lot of it was facilitated through his agent and not himself, and his agent acting kind of on his own in a way. So and that's one of the things that a lot of things people don't talk about.
Right.
So yeah, it was always stupid. I understand the rules are the rules, but sometimes, and we've done it in every single throughout history. When some rules are just flat out wrong or immoral, and sometimes it's okay to say we're not going to punish it. It doesn't make sense to punish you knowing what we know now, and we've grown. And so just because it was a rule back then, even if it was a bad rule, like we're going to uphold it regardless. Like that's never been throughout the history of this country. We've revised old rules and
Absolutely.
Did the best to right some wrongs. So it doesn't make sense to it's petty too. It's like we all saw what he
is.
did on the field. It doesn't make sense. He won the Heisman. Like, so what? Ultimately, like, what benefit is served by continuing to to withhold his Heisman Trophy from him, and just, it never made sense. So happy, that was cool. It was a cool little segment. It was something that people had been demanding, and the Heisman Trust, it was definitely taking a PR hit, and the NCAA were taking a PR hit from that. And so it definitely was social pressure that made them do. They didn't just have a change of heart. It was just like, okay, we're getting raked over the coals with this, and with the changing landscape of college football, it just doesn't make sense to do that. And, just it's not good for business. Because ultimately that's what a lot of these decisions come down to, unfortunately, and not just people being decent people. But regardless, happy for Reggie. He was the best player in college football that season, deserved it, and one of the best running backs of the modern, in college football in the modern era. We saw what he did on the field, so it didn't make sense to continue to be petty and be like, oh no, it's not. There's no Heisman for this year. Okay, yeah, all right.
This Heisman Trophy didn't exist in 2005. Yeah, okay. We all watched it on the field. We all saw what he did. Literally carved up the entire college football world. He was absolutely unstoppable. It's crazy to me. I'm glad that the Heisman had a change of heart and that they decided to give him his trophy back, albeit just because of public pressure, not really out of the kindness of their heart or them seeing the error of their ways. But it's just crazy to me that the NCAA refuses. Like, they didn't even do that. At least the Heisman Committee did that, right? The Heisman Trust at least did that. The NCAA, they're just like, no, we didn't make a mistake. No, they're like the epitome of like bury your head in the sand and pretend like nothing around you is going wrong. And it's enjoyable to watch them take L after L after L in the courts. If they would have evolved with college football as it was changing, they wouldn't be in the situation they are now, and they would still have a lot of the power that they always did have. But instead of evolving and recognizing that, hey, just because we did it that way for so long didn't make it right. If they would have changed with the times, everyone would have been fine. They would have been like, yeah, that was messed up that we did that, but we've evolved and we've changed and we fixed it, right? The NCAA could have done that, but they have continually, to this day, refused to do it. And it's crazy for me to watch. Like, at a certain point, like, you would have to think that, like, they would go into some sort of self-survival mode and like, all right, let's try to, do the best. No, they're just like, nope.
Fight this court case and this court case.
We're going to literally ride this until the wheels fall off. Well, guess what, NCAA? The wheels are gone. You don't have wheels anymore. And you certainly don't have any teeth or any ability to enforce any of your rules. Every time they try to make a rule,
oh my God,
they end up in court. So, happy for Reggie Bush, excited that he gets to have his Heisman back and that his name will be reinserted. I hope they lean into this in the Heisman commercials. I hope they do some sort of jab at the NCAA maybe with the Heisman commercials. I don't know if they will. I just think it would be funny if they kind of leaned into this a little bit and made like the bulk of Heisman Trophy commercials about this come the fall. We'll see if they do it or not. But they could have some really hilarious commercials if they got the right writers to write some stuff.
There's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, there's some potential there. Somebody way funnier and way smarter than me would have to write those scripts, but there's somebody out there that can do a lot with that material. And I think it would be amazing to watch. So hopefully the Heisman committee decides to do that. They probably won't, but selfishly, I hope they do.
All right.
All right, Jordan. Well, that ends the planned portion of tonight's show. We can go ahead and turn it over to the comment section. You can go ahead and voice your frustration about what's going on in the NFL draft. we can kind of go wherever we want at this point. So if you guys have questions or comments or anything you want us to talk about, go ahead and get it into the comment section now. We'll give you the next little bit to do that. Did anybody tell Aaron Rodgers that they were drafting J.J. McCarthy? I don't know if he knows that. He might be freaking out right now.
Yeah.
You know how he gets when they draft quarterbacks.
Yeah. Man, I'm so being a Titans fan is like it's like self-immolation. Like but like you're not allowed to die. Like someone puts the fire out and you're forced to go through it over and over and over and over again. Like it just, oh my God, man. Yeah. I was just so certain. I was like, okay, listen, Joe Walt, I would live with Olu from Penn State, but if we don't, give me a receiver, give me, Roma Dunze or whoever is available.
Yeah.
Brock Bowers, like a pass catching weapon for Will Levis.
Nope.
J.C. Latham. My least favorite. Listen, like I don't think J.C. Latham is a terrible player.
Right.
He got a lot of love in this draft cycle for a lot of reasons. The testing numbers were obviously very outstanding. He has a lot of burst on film, but he just does not. He does not play. He doesn't play up to that at all. Just from what I saw this year, I don't love this pick at all. I thought for one, he didn't. For one, he played right tackle, so we're gonna play him. We're gonna make a guy transition instead of taking who I want. I don't know what the plan was. Like, obviously they didn't expect the Chargers to take Joe Alt at 5, but man, it's like you could have worked out a trade. You could have traded back if you really wanted. But J.C. Latham at 7 is such a reach, man.
It certainly feels that way.
Okay, yeah, this is on an NFL show, but I'm so done with Titans, the Titans and how they draft. It's a new GM. I have all this excitement. We're making all these free agency splashes. Then we go and do this. Like, if Will Levis is going to be our franchise, like, if we're going to see if he's our franchise quarterback, you have to give him. You got to put the pieces around him, and I don't think. I think this was a bad pick. I'm upset, but let's pivot back to Clemson before I lose my mind. I see some people. There's an ongoing argument about Cade. When is there not? Let me see.
Yeah, the draft is always interesting. I thought J.J. McCarthy went to the Jets. He went to the Vikings. That's my bad.
Some people talking about the draft. Okay. Oh, my boy Drew laughing at me too. I just noticed. What's up, Drew?
Yeah.
Oh man, you're gonna get me started. Okay, I guess everybody's talking about the whole argument is about DJ. So and Cade. So let's just rip this Band-Aid.
Let's do it.
I need to pick one that's relevant. Oh no, not that one. Big Load says I would still take DJ. I've seen him ball out. Remember that Notre Dame game? Never seen that from Cade. Name a Cade game. I'll wait. Haha. Well, I don't think I think the whole premise of this argument is flawed. Um, I don't I don't think it should be a Cade versus DJ thing. There's no point. He's two teams removed. He's two schools removed from Clemson now. Like, I mean, I don't see what the point of debating whether or not we would take DJ over Cade right now. Like, that's not where we are. I think there were I think that DJ leaving was something that had to happen. Now, just based off of things that for him and for Clemson, I think it was better for both of them to part ways with how things played out. So I don't want to make this about a DJ discussion because it just there's no really point in arguing that. I don't see the point in arguing that because I think it was something that had to happen. Now, we can have the conversation about whether should we have gone to the transfer portal to get a quarterback. I personally, I would agree I would listen to those arguments and probably agree. But I don't get the point in bringing DJ up in this discussion because we saw how it played out, and he was not the answer to our problems offensively.
No,
Cade hasn't been to this point. So it's like we're arguing over two non-solutions. Like well, so far, and again, Cade has had one season of experience, starting experience. We remember how DJ's first year starting played out. Now, some of that wasn't his fault, but they're at different points in their career, and so Cade's freshman, first year was certainly not where Clemson wanted it to be, but it wasn't 9 touchdowns, 10 picks, and barely 50%, completed passes. So you have to keep things in perspective because we're talking about a guy that's we're talking about a guy that's going into his third season and a guy that is a fifth-year senior at this point. Like it's two different conversations. So I would hope DJ is farther along than Cade is right now. That's where I'm like, we can have the conversation about Clemson's quarterback situation and be honest about where we feel things are right now, and also not make this talk about a quarterback that also didn't work out here. Like that I don't think that's a productive conversation.
Yeah, no, and I don't think there's any Clemson fan out there that thought that it wasn't time to move on from DJ Uiagalelei, right? Everyone, it was a consensus. Maybe there's a couple people out there that thought, maybe we should give him more time, but you'd be hard pressed to find that person. Everybody was a consensus. We need to move on from DJ Uiagalelei. I think it was best for him. I think it was best for Clemson. Now, ultimately, to the point in time where we're at right now, it hasn't been with Cade what we thought it would be. And I know I see Big Load in here, and he's saying Cade hasn't had that wow game. I mean, are we really going to hold on to a Notre Dame game from 3 or 4 years ago where DJ had a wow game? What is DJ as a quarterback in college? And I'm not talking bad about DJ.
I mean, there's a more recent Notre Dame game from DJ we can talk about, but I don't think
I'm just saying, that was obviously, judging by the rest of DJ's career in college, that was the exception. That wasn't the norm for him.
Right, and we're not.
I'm not beating him up. I'm not talking bad about him. DJ's a decent quarterback, but he's a guy that's going to put the ball in harm's way. He's going to make really great throws. He's going to make really bad throws. His decision making is still not, great. Neither is Cade's. I'm not saying Cade's is. So me saying that about DJ is not saying that Cade's like this great quarterback. I think me and you both outlined pretty clearly what Cade needs to work on and the progression that must happen this summer and during fall camp for him to truly lead this team in the way that it needs to be. I think he's got the weapons around him this season. So this is really going to be on Cade. I think we talked about it after spring that, we think with the addition of Wesco and with the steps that Adam Randall seems to have taken and with some steps from other receivers and the potential of a TJ Moore coming in, we think the skill position pieces are finally there for Clemson where they haven't been for the past 3 years, right? So now it's going to be on Cade. Like, there's going to be really no excuses, right? You got to go out there and you got to make it happen. So I'm not saying Cade's, this, Heisman Trophy great quarterback. He's got a lot of work that needs to be done and a lot of growth that needs to happen. But to sit here and say we'd rather have DJ, that's just not being honest. Like we wouldn't.
Right.
Like
it's
we wanted him. We wanted DJ to leave Clemson. Like almost every Clemson fan I've talked to at that point in time was ready for DJ to go. Yeah. They were ready for him to be benched. They were ready for the DJ experiment to be. Dabo got killed for being quote unquote too loyal to DJ.
Yep.
For that entire last season. Obviously, Cade wasn't ready either, so Dabo wasn't making the wrong decision, I guess, now that we've seen Cade. But, it's just we could say we should have went to the portal and got another quarterback. And like you, I would listen to those arguments, and maybe there was a quarterback out there that would have serviced us much better, but we didn't. And we have Cade. And if we're comparing him just to DJ, I don't think either quarterback has this great advantage over the other. I don't think
neither is the solution to Clemson's.
They're both not game changers. They're both not guys that are going to elevate your team at this current moment. Now maybe DJ goes on and has some crazy year where he has a breakthrough and does amazing. That's a possibility. It's also a possibility that Cade does that. So
I mean, you never really know. So
you never know. I mean, some guys just all of a sudden put it together, and you're like, where'd that come from? That was not that dude for like I watched him for 2 seasons. He was terrible. And all of a sudden now he's good. So, that's always a possibility. But as of right now, you take DJ and you take Cade. I mean, to me, there's not a ton of like, you can't really be like, oh, he's clearly better or he's clearly better. I really don't think you can say that about either one of those guys. They're kind of just, they are who they are. They have their flaws. And they both need to grow in different areas.
Okay, well, all right, big load. I mean, we were trying to have a conversation. Unsubscribing, you guys are bringing up the wrong comment. SMH, y'all are idiots. Well, I mean, I followed that conversation along for a good bit. I mean, I do read the chat even before it goes through. So sorry we upset you. I mean, we politely disagreed. We didn't call you names, but you don't have to watch us. So it is what it is. I mean, I'm not going to lose sleep over you.
Have a good one, man.
I mean, you've been begging us this whole, show to talk about Cade Klubnik. And then when we do, you call us idiots. So, I mean, it's all right. Well, we'll move on from the,
let's move on. I mean, that's a dead topic. I mean, it is what it is. Like, everybody's got their differences of opinion. It is what it is. It doesn't really matter. Cade is going to be our starting quarterback heading into 2024. So we just have to hope that he takes the necessary steps and gets better. And we got to hope that supporting cast around him is truly as improved as we think it is. And I think that's the big thing. That supporting cast is going to, have to be really good around him because I don't think he's that quarterback. At least he hasn't been. He hasn't proven to us that he has the ability to elevate players around him.
Absolutely. Daily Wealth says that TJ and Wesco will start. You know, definitely think Bryant Wesco is going to is definitely in position. And I'm really high on TJ Moore. I definitely
Yeah.
feel like those two will. Start is kind of a relative term when we're talking about receivers, and I think with the position that Clemson is in right now from a receiver standpoint, they're going to play a lot of good. There's a pretty good
Yeah.
group of guys that they're going to rotate in and out.
Yeah.
They want to play. I mean, especially barring transfers, but where you stand right now, I mean, Adam Randall is going to play. Antonio Williams is going to play. Tyler Brown is going to play. Troy Stellato is going to play. We saw. I honestly think with the way they've talked about him in the spring, I think Tink Kelly is going to get involved in some form or fashion in the receiver room. Cole Turner is back; he's going to play. And so it's to say they'll start might be a stretch because that might not be all that meaningful. But I definitely think both of them will have significant impacts.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, both of those dudes are going to be a key to whether or not Clemson has a successful offensive season. They're too good. We saw what Westco can do, and you've seen TJ Moore's highlights and his the film that he put out in high school. Got no question of whether he's going to be physically ready. So if he picks up that playbook like we hope he will, it's going to be, it's going to be really. Those are going to be two huge pieces, and they're going to have significant impact on this offense this season. And I can't wait. I can't wait to see TJ Moore. Already pretty excited about Wesco. We saw what his ability and what he can do. So definitely can't wait to see TJ Moore get on campus and start seeing him put up some crazy catches and doing some stuff on the for the Clemson Tigers. So I mean we hit it out of the park with those two guys. So we couldn't have done any better at the receiver position for this class, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. And again, not to not to bring it back to Cade, but it's one of those things where it's like I do think this will be the best, and between the Cade and DJ tenures, like I think this is the best the receiver room has looked from an overall makeup standpoint in a while, and I think it looks the best on paper right now than any of the past 3 seasons. So you got to expect that, especially with from a guy like Tyler Grisham, who has he's definitely taken a lot of heat from the fan base, and some of it earned, some maybe he got too much criticism for things and not enough credit for other things, and but I think this is still a big year for him because this is his room. Like these guys are guys he recruited, and we're really going to see whether or not the development that we expect to take place is taking place, because he had the injuries to point to the last couple 2021 especially, to kind of point to, and going into 2022, and then last year there were still some issues, but they took a step forward. So now it's like, and now the room is in really good shape from a diversity of body type and athlete and talent standpoint, to where this should be one of the better wide receiver rooms in the ACC and in the country. Not saying they're going to be top 10 and they're going to put up all these crazy insane numbers, but in a Garrett Riley offense, I think you have all the ingredients and you have the right body types and skill level from a receiver standpoint to have a really good passing game. And so that's why this is a big year for Tyler Grisham. It's a big year for Cade, a big year for Garrett Riley himself.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to pump too much into the receiver room, because again, I think Clemson fans have been a little bit scarred by the last 3 years, and understandably so. And a lot of people are taking a believe it when I see it approach, and that I think that's totally valid.
Completely understandable.
But just on paper, from an overall standpoint, there's no reason why this wide receiver room isn't successful this year. I can't see a reason. I can't see why they wouldn't succeed, barring a massive rash of injuries. There's a lot of depth. There's a lot of depth there, and there's a I think the biggest thing is there's a diversity and skill and body type that we didn't have in recent years. We have, big bodied, like just physical, physical specimens at receiver, but we have the smaller, technicians and speedsters and route runners and slot types. You have guys with soft hands that can make contested catches, and you couple that with, I think, a really good tight end room. I mean, I think a lot of teams would love to have what we have right now at receiver and tight end, and so that's my long-winded talk on the receivers.
Yeah.
There's no reason why they
John brings up a really good point. He said, I think the total talent depth for wide receiver and tight end is better than it has been in years. Cade just has to settle down, quit forcing things. He has proven he can be accurate. Yeah, and that's the big thing. Like, he's just got to stop trying to play hero ball at times. He's got to play within the offense and let Garrett Riley call the plays, and just – sometimes, Dabo said it in the past, sometimes the best play you can make is to throw it out of bounds, right? Instead of holding on to the ball and ending up with a 10-yard sack, right? When you're trying to just hang on and make a play, or throwing the ball into double coverage because, you just trust your arm talent that much. So maturing in that way, I think will go a long way, especially with the improved talent in the skill positions. So if he can just play within the system and let things come to him and, kind of take it as it comes, no hero ball, I think we'll be in a much better situation. He doesn't have to, be this, hero. He doesn't have to be this guy that's just creating all of the offense on his own. We have a skilled offensive coordinator. We have an improved, skill positions. We have guys that can go out there and make plays. He's just got to find the open guy and make accurate passes and make good decisions. So,
absolutely. Els King says, I think 1 full year is ample time to know if a quarterback has that it factor or not. I think in some cases, I think some cases, yeah, but there are plenty of examples where that's not been the case. Now, this is going to get. I don't want anybody to take this out of context. I'm about to make a crazy comparison. I am not saying that Cade is this player.
I know where you're going.
Please let me say that Cade is not this player. Cade is not this player. But do you guys remember 2018 Joe Burrow?
Yeah.
I didn't say 2019 Joe Burrow. I said 2018 Joe Burrow.
No, because nobody who knew who Joe Burrow was in 2018.
No, you're absolutely right. But you know what? He started a full season for LSU in 2018.
He did. Yeah.
And he was the definition of average. And I also want to point out, he was a true senior in 2018. I want to point that. Actually, that's not right. He was a junior in 2018. His first year starting, he had spent a season or two at Ohio State, transferred out.
Yep.
And ended up at LSU, and he won the starting job. He's junior. He's one of the more experienced guys in the room. He won the job, and he was the definition of average for most of that season with really good weapons. I mean, you had, obviously the wide receiver room that he had would become, what they were in more of what they were in 2019, but he had a good core of pieces around him, and he did not look all that special. And so, it wasn't until his senior year where he really figured, where things really just kind of clicked. And obviously getting Joe Brady and all that, he had a very elite, like generational receiver core, but he's also been really good in the NFL. So, I mean, he was obviously really good himself, and he put up historic numbers. So I am not saying Cade is Joe Burrow. I don't think he's anywhere close to Joe Burrow. I don't think he's going to have a Joe Burrow type season anytime soon. But I'm saying that you can't always tell just from one season of one season of quarterback play. There are a lot of things that go into whether or not a quarterback is successful. Some of it is on him, the quarterback himself, and there are a lot of aspects of it that aren't in his control. And so, we saw a lot of issues from Cade this past season, a ton. And the questions we have about him are still up in the air. But I do not think that solely because last season didn't go as well, didn't go the way we thought, that he cannot, the light bulb can't come on. Like, I don't think that's the reason to conclude that. But again, there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee. But I don't think one season is necessarily always enough to really tell you whether or not a player will be what he eventually becomes.
Yeah, so, I mean, I get what he's saying,
right?
And in some cases it is, but people do have the ability to grow. And again, he may not. This may be what Cade is. That's a possibility as well. But for Clemson fans, we just got to hope that he takes a couple steps.
Right.
He don't have to have that breakout season you're referring to. We just need him to play with.
I used an extreme example to make a point.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't think we need Cade. I think if Cade can play at a third team All ACC type level, I think Clemson's a much improved team in 2024.
For sure.
Like, we don't need him to be an All-American, put up all these crazy numbers. Like, that would be great. I mean, we hired Garrett Riley to be more explosive, so that would be great. But if Cade could just, make the routine stuff routine,
mm-hmm.
and the non-successful plays, not turn the disaster plays into unsuccessful plays.
Right.
So, like, instead of a sack fumble return for a touchdown, you throw an incompletion, you throw it away.
Yeah, you throw it away. Right.
Or even if you take a sack, but hold on to the football.
And that's that maturity, and that's that growth, right? If we could just go like for a game next season without a turnover, that'd be great.
I mean, like, how many games?
That's something we didn't do in 2023.
Right. Like, the thing with Cade was his mistakes were so magnified it was always the worst possible result in that situation from a win probability standpoint.
Yeah.
It was whether it was a pick six or a return for a sack fumble, or turnover on downs on a poor read. Like, it just, the things that drastically, hurt you from a win probability standpoint, from a momentum standpoint, those were always the plays that happened with Cade. And so, like, if we just remove those, even if he was like still the same, like, erratic, just not always making the, not hitting big plays and kind of, taking check downs and doing the stuff that we saw from him a lot last season, but just not turning the ball over.
Yeah.
And not making the disastrous, momentum swinging plays.
Yes.
Does Clemson lose 4 games? I don't think so. I don't think there necessarily would have been a national championship playoff contender, but
no,
I think they would. I think they could have been in the ACC championship. They could have, maybe I don't think you lose that. You had Florida State on the ropes, and we know what happened there. Even if say the Duke game plays out the exact same way, because I think there were a lot of reasons that Duke game went the way it was that were beyond Cade. Like your veterans were making awful mistakes too. Like that was a total team failure for the most part. Yeah. But every game after that, there were a lot of Cade influenced mistakes that you just can't make. So maybe you don't you win, maybe you win the Florida State game in the NC State game, and even the Miami game, like that was such a winnable game. Like I just maybe you still lose the NC State game because that they were playing out of their mind, and obviously honestly the defense had some really bad lapses in that game. But even if you just cut your losses in half and you're a 10-2 squad instead of an 8-4 in the regular season, just how are we thinking about this, this upcoming season? We're okay, so obviously the offense wasn't as explosive as we wanted. Cade wasn't everything we wanted it to be. We hoped he would be this year, but another year in the system, he showed he didn't. He showed he could be more of a game manager, and maybe he takes that step in 2024. We're thinking about these things differently. If the massive, disastrous mistakes that Clemson that had so often, even in the games that they won, we're thinking about this season a lot different, and maybe there's not as much pessimism about kind of where we are from a quarterback position. And that's the thing that we have no reason to we have nothing to go on right now. He's when we take the field against Georgia, is Cade going to make those drastic, just game altering decisions that he made so often at the worst times last year? I don't know.
Yeah,
that's where it has to start, really.
He's going to have to go out there and prove. The whole team's got to go out there and prove it, right? These catastrophic turnovers that plagued Clemson from start to finish last year, from literally start to finish, even in the wins. It's just we can't have those again. We didn't play a single game last year where we didn't turn the ball over. It's just unacceptable. Stuff like that can't happen. So that's the steps that you hope Cade makes from a maturity standpoint, and just understanding playing within the system. And, it's okay to make it, 2nd and 10, right? You can throw the ball away. It's okay to make it 3rd and 10 or even 4th and 10 and punt the ball away versus a sack fumble, right? That maybe gets returned for, 6 points the other way, right? That's way worse than punting the ball away. Sometimes, the defense just makes a better call, and you got to live to fight another down, right? And not put your defense in vulnerable situations. And that's the maturity and the growth that we really need to see from Cade. That ability to recognize that and make those split-second decisions on when to give up on a play, and not just try to extend it until, catastrophic failure hits, right? So, we'll see. It's definitely something that he's capable of doing. He's capable of making better decisions when it comes to stuff like that. And that's not even really a talent thing. That's just a maturity thing and understanding the game and, not trying to play hero ball. And that's certainly a growth that could happen over the next 4 months. So, again, it'll be a wait and see for Clemson Tiger fans because, like you mentioned earlier, we have been somewhat jaded by, reports in practice and things that have been told even in years past that never came to fruition at all.
Right.
So, again, you will go into this Georgia game with a lot of nerves and hoping that you can stay in there and compete. And that's an unfortunate place to be as a Clemson Tiger fan, knowing where this program was and what it's capable of doing. Really, you're going to go into that Georgia game like, hey, hoping that we can compete with them, right? That's really the feel going into that Georgia game, at least as of right now, right? So, and Cade's not the only one. There's a lot of growth that needs to happen on this team between now and kickoff in August against Georgia. There's a lot of growth that needs to happen. Cade's just magnified because he's the quarterback, and that's the most important position on the field. So it's obviously going to be talked about way more. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we didn't talk about the growth that obviously needs to happen from the offensive line standpoint.
Big
Like,
time.
I think, again, like we're not talking about like some, we didn't recruit bums. Like, I don't believe that.
Right.
I think there's a lot of talent in this room, and I just, well, we'll see. Again, it's offensive line has been a position group that Clemson has never really been very successful at, as far as producing high-end NFL talent. But they've had good offensive lines in the past. Like, can we get closer to what we had, from the 2015 to 2021? Like, those were not overly dominant offensive lines. I mean, 2018 was probably the best. You're just really experienced, but none of those guys were high-end NFL talents.
Yeah.
So they were good players, solid football players. But like, if we could get that kind of play and a less disaster-prone Cade, like, I think things look a lot different for this season, because I think the rest of the offense, obviously the receivers and tight ends, and and you have a really well, and this kind of leads into my the next question that I wanted to put up. But running back, I think you have obviously you have a very definitive running back one that's poised to have a big year. So I mean, I think you have the pieces. So it just but the growth needs to be had. And Dabo obviously has talked about it. He said the offense is, when after the spring game, he still talked about it. It's like we're still incomplete, and that's kind of where it is. And not from we don't have what we need, or we don't. He wasn't saying like we're missing a piece. He was saying we're not together. This offense isn't together yet. Like, we have the pieces, but we're still fitting guys into the puzzle and figuring out, and getting the full picture. And so that's that's where what needs to happen between now and fall camp week 1 and all of that, the season. But let me put this comment up because it was something I did want to address. John asked, "Are you at all concerned about running back depth since Haynes is injury prone and no one else has proven yet to be solid number 2?" Some are worried. I think there's some legitimate concern. Like, I've never been under the illusion that this was like Clemson was going to have like a real second back, that was going to get a significant amount of carries.
Yeah.
We didn't really see much in the spring game to that wowed us from the running back group. I mean, Keith Adams, I don't even know how many carries did he get? Like,
I think like 6, maybe.
Yeah, just
not very many.
Wasn't overly special. We didn't see anything overly special. I mean, we saw Peyton Strecco and Tristan Rigby. Like, we saw like guys
Strecco probably had the best day out of all the backs.
Yeah, Strecco definitely did. Jarvis Green had a couple of decent runs. Like, there wasn't anything to write home about. So, like, I think from an injury standpoint, if something were to happen to Phil Maffa, the staff doesn't seem overly worried about it. And we've heard good things about Keith Adams Jr., but I think there's a question mark there. I think from what they've said, I mean, I fully expect Keith Adams Jr. to be the number 2 guy right now, where things stand.
To be fair, for the running backs in the spring game specifically, the run blocking was horrendous.
It wasn't great. It wasn't
for
great.
A lot of it. I mean, there were runs where they didn't even get the handoff, and it was already all over. So
right, like they didn't get much opportunity. Like
they didn't get a lot of opportunity to really get out in space and make somebody miss or show their ability. So you gotta put that part of it in there as well, and you gotta hope that again the offensive line takes that step so that we can have adequate run blocking so that a Phil Maffa can eat throughout the season, um, or whoever lines up, whoever runs out there when he's catching some water or catching his breath on the sideline. So um, Keith Adams seems to be the guy coming out of spring, but again, there's a whole summer ahead. There's a whole fall camp. Nothing's set in stone right now, but
right.
I do think if Clemson played a game tomorrow, Keith Adams Jr. would be the guy running out there when Phil Maffa's not in the game.
Yeah, I mean, and I think he's I mean, from what and we've seen a decent bit of him in spots in the past, like last year, but
Yeah.
and he's a very powerful back. Like he
Oh
just
yeah.
so I think he can be a serviceable running back. I mean, if you think back to the Travis Etienne years, and we were very very blessed that he did not have many injury issues
Yeah.
throughout his career.
Yeah.
But we were never really talking about the guys that we had behind him a whole lot. Through the years, like who was it? Like you had got Adam Choice and Tavian Feaster and Lynn J. Dixon, but like
Yeah.
you didn't really have like there was never a point where they were expected to be anything more than change of pace, type of back. So like if you get a full healthy season, I mean the hope if you get a full healthy season from Phil Maffa, which hasn't been an issue to this point, and he hasn't had a ton of injury. But I mean he's a really well built kid, and he's been pretty durable. You should be okay, and it gives you time to get your younger guys up to speed. David Ajumame is obviously has talent, but he had a growth, a freshman curve to get through this spring and clear that he showed promise at times, but he's still figuring it out. And we talked about Keith Adams. Keith Adams is he's the experienced leader. But among the rest of the guys, and I think he's a quality running back, and so I think I don't think it'll be a concern, but I think it's understandable if there is just kind of you having that in the back of your head, like we don't really know what we have there fully. So, but running back, I think because running back is it's a position where it's like, well, you don't really need to have a difference maker at running back to be successful running the football.
Yeah.
So it's just like people don't really concern themselves with like the second running backs so much, but yeah, it is something to keep in mind though, for sure, because injuries do happen, and who do they turn to, and who's going to be, and even just if Phil Maffa is healthy, who's going to be that change of pace back to
Right.
But again, if you need to obviously you need Jay Haynes to stay healthy. I would love to see him stay healthy because I think he has a different skill set just from a speed and in size standpoint. He's like smaller, shiftier.
Yeah.
I think he adds a little bit. He adds a little bit of a different look. I think Keith Adams is kind of a similar style back to Phil. He's gonna run into contact. He's gonna create contact, but he's not gonna be overly shifty and break off these big 70-yard run with breakaway speed or anything like that. So that's something to keep an eye on. But I spent a lot of time on that question. Let's see. Let's see. I wanted to. I think somebody mentioned. Oh yeah, James Scott. Kind of to go back to the quarterback conversation, he said, "Let's look at it in reverse." He said, "Take Tyler Van Dyke at Miami. One season, he looked good. He was touted as a potential Heisman candidate going into last year. Then last year happened, and well, yeah. I mean, you know, different circumstances. Like he went through a coaching change, and obviously a scheme change, offensive coordinator. So there were a lot of things that definitely didn't help. But you know, Cade went through an offensive coordinator change. You know, he had to learn a new system last year. But to your point, the overall gist of what you're saying is true. Like there are a lot of things that can happen that can determine whether a player has a good year or not. Like Tyler Van Dyke, I think he was a redshirt freshman. Like he looked great. Like he came in for Miami when De'Aaron King, I think, was the starter then, and he had a big year. He put up a ton of yards, and he fit that Rhett Lashley system. And then Rhett Lashley goes to take the SMU job, and you know, you bring in Josh Gaddis from Michigan and Mario Cristobal. You know, Mario Cristobal comes in and makes some changes of how the offense runs, and you know, it wasn't to his skill set. Now, I don't think the scheme is the problem with Cade, but it's an example of, you know, some things that happen outside of a quarterback's control that can determine whether or not they have a good season or not. And sometimes it takes one off season to make tweaks and you know, so it goes both ways. You can, you know, a player can go from looking pretty pedestrian one year and look, you know, like a world beater the next, and the exact opposite. So
yes.
We got a Miami. Speaking of Miami, we got a Miami fan in the chat. He's thank you to Crib Kane for showing up. We appreciate any, you know, non-Clemson fans. We welcome all fan bases in the chat. He asked a question. He said, Dabo adds talent through the portal, but on the positive side, it doesn't add talent through the portal. But on the positive side, I don't see tons of guys leaving through the portal, or I just never see it as much as other programs. Is that accurate? I mean, for the most part, I mean, Clemson definitely has guys leave, but they've been a pretty good player retention team. Like that's kind of how they've operated, you know, from in the NIL space, and that's kind of what they've devoted a lot of their resources to. Is, you know, they want to get guys that they want to evaluate and get guys that they think will stay, and they use their NIL as ways to do that. So yeah, you know, Clemson hasn't had the volume of departures and the impactful departures that maybe some other programs have had. But you know, they're not immune. I mean, they just had two transfers in the same day. But again, those were the first two transfers that they've had this portal cycle. So, and neither one of them were starters or even close to being starters.
Right. I mean,
so
we talked about it last episode. You know, a little bit about this, and you know, Clemson tends to lose more depth pieces. Not never, but you rarely see a Clemson starter leave. And if they do, there tends to be some other circumstances surrounding that departure.
Right.
You know, you think of Darion Kendrick and guys like that have left, and there's other situations surrounding why they left Clemson, and they weren't in the greatest standing with the program when they did leave. But one that does come to mind is, you know, Makuba, who exited for Texas. That was probably the most significant loss this offseason, I guess, if you were ranking it. And not that I wasn't surprised that Makuba wasn't coming back to Clemson. I was just surprised that he was going to another college
and not to
play
the
football
NFL,
and not the NFL. I really assumed that he was gone, but I assumed that he was going to the NFL, not to another college team. So that was really the only big one. I think the Crib Kane hits it kind of perfectly. It doesn't happen as much in Clemson as it does in other programs, and for all the reasons that you already mentioned, that's where Clemson as much of talk out there nationally as there about, oh, Clemson doesn't use NIL, they don't use the transfer portal. That's true, they don't use the transfer portal, but that's not true that they don't use NIL. They just tend to use it majority of their NIL for roster retention and not necessarily for recruiting.
Right.
Not that they don't use any for recruiting. There's just a bigger portion focused on roster retention. And I think that's, that coupled with the culture and just kind of who Clemson recruits, they try to, make it a fit for kind of what they do. And all of that stuff kind of adds to not as many departures. Obviously, we got people that leave in the portal every year like every other team, but it's definitely not as much as certain programs out there.
Yeah. So when you compare Clemson to their peers, like the programs that recruit at a relatively similar level, because it doesn't make sense to compare them to, like a G5 school where these guys aren't going to be just jumping into the portal looking for the guys that are looking for playing time. Because they're not really going to have a lane. But when you compare them to the Alabamas and the Georgias, a lot of the Ohio States, and Michigan, like you could name the programs that the upper tier of Power 5 programs. Like they don't, Clemson doesn't have nearly as many departures on a yearly basis as some of those programs, especially the ones that operate heavier in the NIL space, from a transfer portal standpoint, because you bring in guys, it's going to push out other guys too. So that's part of it.
Yeah, that's the world we live in college football right now.
Right. John says, thought Adam Choice was solid in the red zone, just not every day. Oh, yeah, no, that was not a slight to Adam Choice. He was a really good second back. I mean, what was it, in Travis Etienne's freshman year, right, when we had kind of a three-back, like I think he had like 700 yards. I mean, he was always a good change of pace back. Yeah. I liked Adam Choice a lot. But yeah, he just was not like Adam Choice. We're like nobody looks back and thinks about so man, we had a really good 1-2 punch. Like no, it was Travis Etienne. Like even and it was kind of like even in Etienne's freshman year, it was like once Travis had his break, really especially after that Louisville game, he broke off that long run and it was just clear like we had
all over.
He was a different type of back, and so in 2018 it was just. There was a clear separation after that, and but it was the Travis Etienne show from that. So if we can get like an Adam Choice type of production or player out of somebody behind Phil Maffa, like that would be great. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah,
I loved Adam Choice. I think he was a really, really solid player and really unselfish considering like. He had been in the program longer. And,
I mean, you think about it, that's a tough pill to swallow, man. This young dude comes in and just, kind of unseats you and kind of just rolls into that starting job and never looks back. But, he stayed there and, became a really quality change of pace guy and number 2 guy in the running back room. So, and you need those people because, you can have an amazing RB1, but they can't play every snap of every game. They got to go on the sideline and get a breather and so you got to have serviceable backs behind them that can step in and, there's not this huge gaping drop off between them and the first team back.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he could have bolted like another running back in that room that I already mentioned by name, but I don't want to again.
He should not be named.
So
he wore a certain number that he never should have been able to wear.
Yeah. Don't get me started.
Yeah. I will forever be salty about that.
Jared Verse going to the Rams. I don't believe Don't believe Nate Wiggins has come off the board yet. The Steelers are on the clock with pick 20.
He has not.
All right. I think that's going to do it for tonight. Anything else you see that you want to point out? Or
no, I think we can go and leave it there. We've been on for approaching 2 hours and 20 minutes now, so probably best we go ahead and shut down the show. Appreciate everybody showing up tonight, getting into the comment section, interacting with us. We still have 15 people in the live chat right now. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Those that are going to watch this on the rewatch, just a reminder, we will put the timestamps to each topic in the description of this video shortly after it ends. And again, appreciate all you guys for showing up. We will be right back here next Thursday, 8 p.m. to talk Clemson football and college football. Can't wait to see you guys there.
Absolutely. Thank you guys. Seriously, once again for tuning in. Like we really appreciate it, each and every one of you for showing up. Yes, even you, Big Load.
Absolutely. If you're still in here, Big Load, you can still come hang out next week. No hard feelings here.
Yeah. Yeah. So seriously, once again, we really appreciate it, and we'll have more to talk about next week. Kind of as the NFL draft concludes, we'll talk a little bit about that and some other stuff that happens in the week. So can't wait for it. Same time, 8 p.m. Thursday. Be here. If you haven't already, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't. Some of our newcomers that have showed up. Maybe some of the non-Clemson fans. Feel free to give us a sub. It'd be really cool. We're getting close to the where are we at subscriber wise?
Pretty close to 5,000.
5,000, yeah. So let's get to we're creeping, getting close. Obviously, the off season, it's a slower time. So,
absolutely, yeah.
It'd be really great to get to 5,000, and it just helps us, helps Mark, and the overall voice of college football community. So that would be greatly appreciated. And yeah, guys, we'll see you next week.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. So until next week, I'm Tiger Paul Craven. He's Jordan Bowman. Go Tigers.
Later, y'all.